Great. And then it should give you a
connect to the
little,
cloud server,
awesome.
and now it's recording. Yeah.
Great. So welcome back to Isolation Cast, our first video content. Today it's going to be a little bit different, but again, in kind of helping us all try to find this joy, I wanted to bring on one of the kind of coolest and most dynamic theater professionals I know right now, who's just doing really cool work, Amanda Spooner. Amanda, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Great. So if you could introduce yourself to the folks at home, even for the folks who are listening who might know you, and tell us a little bit about the projects you're kind of working on right now and what you're doing to kind of fill this strange time we're finding ourselves in.
Sure. So my name is Amanda Spooner. As you mentioned, I am a theatrical stage manager. I'm a proud member of Actors Equity Association. I have been working professionally as a stage manager for, 20 years, almost 20 years. I've been an equity member since the fall of 2008. I work primarily on new plays and musicals, which I love because you never know where they're going to go. And I've always liked having to be in the moment and being present. I was trained in school, like a lot of us. I went to community college in California, where I received my associate's degree in theater arts. And then I transferred to San Francisco State. I sort of accidentally got into San Francisco State. I thought I was going to an info session, and it turns out I was like signing up for the theater program, which was kind of funny, but it like turned out fine. I went there for technical theater and design. I had a great time. I was there for 2 years. And while I was there, I was stage managing shows that featured drag queens. And so there were written musicals that had drag queens in them. There were drag shows that had drag queens in them. I myself was performing as what was called a faux drag queen at the time, which was a person who identifies as a woman playing as a man playing a woman. My stage name was Venus Envy. So whenever whenever I actually got to perform, I always performed with food. I still know how to make an ice cream sundae with my feet. So I was sure to like leave the stage nice and messy. It was like punk rock stage management in reverse. Karma was always a bitch. Am I allowed to swear on this?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Karma was always a bitch. You know, I'd always end up having to change the clocks in the dressing room so that people wouldn't operate on drag time, that sort of thing. But it was a big, wonderful drag family. And I did, like I said, some stuff that was scripted, a lot of stuff that wasn't. And I think that that's really where I learned a lot about stage management, because it was about being present and being in the moment and being adaptable. And I decided I wanted to be in New York. So I went to New York for a year, worked on The Musical, when John Tartaglia was in it. And that was post Avenue Q. And I did that. I did the tour of that, and I applied for grad schools. And the reason I went to grad school, although, do you want to know this? Maybe you want to know this? I don't know.
Yeah. Actually,
people usually ask.
Well, a ton of theater artists listen to this, and a lot of the students at University of Florida will. So I think this will point them in a good direction.
So the reason I went to grad school is because I did have my foundational learning about stage management based really in drag performance in San Francisco. And so I went, I'm from the Bay Area, and I went to grad school because I knew I wanted to end up in New York. And I knew that stage management and theater in New York was an industry, like it was an actual business industry. In San Francisco, there is some theater industry there, but at the time, a lot of people were moonlighting theater artists. There were a lot of tiny companies that people had started, which were great. But a lot of people would like work at Macy's during the day and then work in theater at night. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to work in theater all the time. I wanted that to be the source of my livelihood. So I knew New York is where I needed to go. At least I felt that. And so I applied for grad schools. I applied for 9 different programs because I really wanted to learn a formal approach to stage management, silly things like considering union rules and stuff like that. And so I wanted to take that sort of raw material and experience that I had. doing drag shows and other shows in San Francisco, and then really step it up a notch and go into the more formal approach to theatrical stage management. So I ended up going to Yale, which was great. I graduated in '09. I got my equity card there. I went straight to New York after that. My thesis was went on to an off-Broadway run. So I did that. I spent a decade in New York, living, working mostly in New York. I eventually, very quickly actually, ended up working exclusively on new plays and musicals. And I do think, again, just to reiterate, like, I think that that is really, the roots of that are in the improv nature of drag, et cetera. The need for me as a stage manager to just be present and be listening to what's changing in the room. So that was like the wild frontier, was new plays and musicals with people like Anne Washburn and Branna Jacobs Jenkins. So I thought, this is it. This is the life for me. I in part got my MFA because I knew I eventually wanted to teach. I am definitely that person who had stuffed animals lined up in front of a chalkboard when I was a kid and really wanted to be an educator. While I was in New York, I realized that I like informal methods of education. So I started a program called Tandem in New York, which was about peer-to-peer education and using each other's resources in a really respectful and fruitful way. And so we had a lot of events like Stage Manager on Stage Manager speed dating. We had a lot of symposiums. We still have events, but now I'm the vice chair of the Stage Managers Association, and I am the founder of the Year of the Stage Manager 2020/2021, because we are going to extend the Year of the Stage Manager.
Yes, good.
We deserve it, damn it.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
through June of 2021. And so I have a lot of community projects going on. I'm really excited about a lot of the programming that is housed at the Stage Managers Association. So we're doing a lot of that on Zoom. I'm on faculty at Ithaca College, which is why I speak in the past tense about living in New York. I do a lot of projects still in New York. I develop a lot of new work with people like Branna Jacobs Jenkins. I still am on Sing Street, which is a musical based on the 2016 movie. It's a wonderful musical. I did the workshop of it last August in 2019, and I was the PSM of the production at New York Theater Workshop this last fall, which closed at the end of January. And we were 4 hours into our first on-stage rehearsal at the Lyceum when Broadway shut down. So we're on hiatus. We're gonna see, just like everyone else, what the future brings with this, what I'm calling the extended spring break, because nobody has like named it yet. It's not like the Great Recession or the Great Depression or anything like that yet. I refuse to call it coronavirus. So I'm calling it the extended spring break. And I realized that might conjure up images of naughty spring breakers still disobeying, but I just am trying to really, to answer your question about what's going on now in these wild times, I'm really trying to embrace the idea that we all suddenly are confronted with ourselves. Like this truly like massive pause that all of us needed and probably craved on some level, especially theater artists, and didn't really, we could never even fathom taking like 2 weeks and just spending it, or 8 weeks or whatever it ends up, and spending it with ourselves or with our families or on Zoom with friends or like, former lovers or whatever. And I think it's a scary gift is what it really is. So yeah.
It's so scary because what's lovely is I'm seeing friends who I've always known are like performers, artists, and they do things now and then, but there for the first time, actually, I'm watching them like smile and like creating work, even if it's like art in their own home, and they're posting it online and they're so proud of it. And I'm just like, you know what, this might suck and this unemployment might be really scary for some people, but like, I'm watching people flourish, and I think it's so amazing, which is also kind of why I wanted to do this, because it's one of those, it's like, oh, we're in such a dark time, but like some of the brightest things come out of the darkest times. I was interviewing somebody and they said, I think there's going to be an art movement in about 100 years that we're going to refer to as the COVID period. and
Mhm.
COVID period of art, just because so much is coming out of this right now and there's so much going on. But like, I love that even with the year of the stage manager, you guys are keeping things going through all of this and doing Zoom. So can you talk a little bit about year of the stage manager and kind of what that's doing and what you all are aiming for with that?
Sure. So Year of the Stage Manager was born, the idea of it was born in July of 2019. We had known really since, and by we, I mean the stage management community. I serve on council at Actors Equity Association. So I
Mhm.
think the conversation about the history of stage managers and equity actually might have started in that circle of friends. But in February of 2019, we realized that February of 2020 would mark 100 years since there was explicit language in contract negotiations regarding stage managers. So stage
Mhm.
managers had already been a part of Actors Equity, but just not explicitly so. And so, and I mean, we still, when we're on contract, are still referred to as capital A actors in a lot of contract language. So we
Yeah.
haven't come that far in a century. But it was still exciting, nevertheless, to have something that could be marked, you know, by a calendar occasion for stage managers
Mhm.
and Actors Equity Association. So knowing that that was the case, you know, I'm always advocating for stage managers. I use social media a lot to do it.
Mhm.
Um, I like peaceful advocacy. I am probably guilty of participating in call out culture when it comes to production assistants, maybe, and like
Mhm.
advocating for their rights and
Mhm.
compensation. But I do like to try and do it peacefully and through peer-to-peer education and through conversation, because I do think social media is a great tool. So anyway, I was doing that a lot anyway. And Lindsey Jones, who is a sound designer, who's one of the founders of the Collaborator Party. So when the sound designers lost their Tony, he and John Gramata were the two sound designers who were the figureheads for getting people's attention about that and amassing support and eventually having the sound design Tony reinstated. But nevertheless, they held on to this thing called the Collaborator Party. So I was a co-host at the Collaborator Party. Lindsey Jones and I knew each other from working on shows together. And he reached out to me on Facebook and he said, look, I see everything you're doing, everything you're saying on your own Facebook, on these other groups. And he said, you know what, honestly, you sound like a sound designer. We have an affinity and that people don't know what we do. And so people don't
Mhm.
seem to know what stage managers do. And I feel like if they knew
Mhm.
more about what you did and you were such you know, was talking to me, he's like, you're such a big fan of education anyway. He's like, really, you should just say that 2020 is the year of the stage manager. And it was like, what? So can we do that? Is that legal? And he was like, legal, just say it. That's what you're doing. And I was like, okay.
Sure.
Yeah, so I called a handful of stage managers that are, you know, influential in the community or in equity, and
Mhm.
I said, you know, I just want to give you a heads up, I'm doing this, and they were like, okay, great. And so I just went on Facebook and made it so. So the whole point is to educate people about stage management and to celebrate stage managers. We are derailed a little bit in our programming, but we are recovering
Mhm.
because of the extended spring break, the COVID period. So we had some events. Every month of 2020 was dedicated to a different topic regarding stage management and the
Mhm.
community. And so now we are just looking at those topics with great focus on all of them between now and June of 2021. We're doing away with that sort of like, this month is this topic,
Mhm.
and just saying, hey, all of these
Mhm.
things are important all throughout the year. We have a website, which is
Mhm.
ysm2020.com. We have a Sminstagram, so people can take it over. As of January 1st of 2020, stage managers were taking over the Sminstagram on their various projects, but a lot of those projects are on hiatus. So stage
Mhm.
managers are starting to shake the dust off of their eyes and come back to the Sminstagram and are documenting what they're doing at home and the projects they're working on. So it really is just a big grassroots campaign to get people talking about stage managers. Again, for stage managers to educate people about what they do, for the people who love them to celebrate them. On the 100th anniversary, there were stage managers across the United States that gathered for a photo, for a Centennial Photo. Those were really remarkable. There were so many people in New York. I think it was maybe 120 that showed up, little stage managers that showed up for that photo. So that was really thrilling. And yeah, we just really, again, it's a grassroots campaign, so it's up to the people to run with it. We have two very specific sort of mini campaigns going on, one called Credit Your SM, which we are asking both producers and publications to include at least the PSM when designers and actors are listed in a press release or in any sort of critical content. And then we're also, if the award season, when it happens, we are asking people to thank their stage managers. So if they feel that it's appropriate to do so, we're asking that people thank their stage managers, not simply by name, but they say, I want to thank our stage manager, Joe Schmo, or whoever it might be. So yeah, and there's a Facebook group for the year of Stage Manager 2020. It has over 5,000 members in it. Most of them are stage managers. A lot of them are not, which is very exciting. So yeah, anybody who's listening, feel free to go to the Facebook group, to the website, go to our Sminstagram. And I think it's totally okay that we now have a year and a half to celebrate stage managers. Yeah, and the campaign color is bright orange because stage managers often find themselves wearing all black so that they are not standing out. And because the campaign ultimately is about visibility, we thought, what's the opposite of wearing all black? Well, it's bright hunter orange.
We love that. Also, because that's like the color of a good spike chick too. So like, you know, we all love a little spike chick.
That.
I love that, and I think that's so important because I even caught myself after it all started. I went through my whole website and made sure that every show that I have referenced as a designer or a director, that I also have my stage manager listed. Because like as a director, I am the most unorganized person, so I literally have had some of the most amazing stage managers who have gotten me through. Because like, you know, it's I think my favorite story you've ever put on social media is that you stage managed your own, you know, giving birth, which I just think is such an amazing story. I think it's so funny. But like, you know, it's just, we need stage managers even outside of the theater, and so I think it's really important. And I think I love seeing the education, pushing for better education of people to become stage managers, even at programs that don't have a stage management program, just because, you know, it's such a wonderful thing. And so I love that. So everyone out there, make sure you go join the stage manager, and thank you, stage managers, at the end of the day, please. Thank you.
Our content is all free, which has always been really important to me. I think that, you know, in this country and other countries too, we pay a lot for formal education. As an educator, I work really hard to make sure my students are getting their money's worth, whatever that means. But you're the Stage Manager 2020, any content or programming events, eventual in-person events, any of the events that come through that are free to participate. So
I love that. Yeah, because I was shocked as I've been going through my master's to find out that like most of our education is, our research is publicly funded, but then it's not accessible to the general public who funds it. And that's when I went, oh no, this needs to change. This has to change, because how do we expect people to educate themselves? So I love that, because this brings me joy. So can you talk a little bit about what's bringing you joy right now? You always have such a wonderfully positive outlook as a social media presence, which I love. So could you just talk a little bit about what you're doing to find joy right now?
Well, you might be able to hear my joy above me. I'm on the first floor of our house, and you can hear my 4-year-old bouncing around up there. Jack, who is my theater baby, he was born on a Monday like a good equity kid. You know, we split our time really between Ithaca and New York City. So when I was working on Sing Street, especially when I was PSMing it in October of 2019, I was really only seeing Jack one day a week. Thank God for my husband. Amazing. And moving able to deal with me sort of coming and going and very seldom being home. And so really I went from being a Broadway stage manager, still professor at Ithaca College, taught class last night, which was fun via Zoom. But I went from being a Broadway stage manager during the day to a preschool teacher for about 10 hours a day. But it's great. It's been a nice opportunity to get to know my son again in a way that I didn't get to when I wasn't seeing him on a daily basis. So he brings me an incredible amount of joy. My husband does as well. But as you were saying earlier, just checking in with people, seeing what they're able to create, being able to be a rock for people when they need it, being able to reach out to people and also tell them when I'm freaking out and letting them serve that role in my life. We've all been, I think, doing a pretty good job of sharing the responsibilities of being everyone's foundation when they need it. But I just, in general, this is going to sound really sort of silly, but I love people. I just love people. I always have. I think I've spent most of my life in cities. I'm most comfortable when there's 8 million people like on every side of me. I just really love people, even when, they cut me off in traffic. I still just on some level just love them. Like I love that everyone has a whole universe behind their eyes in which they're thinking about things and considering things and planning things and experiencing emotions. So this, it might feel like we're more socially distant from one another right now, but I've never felt so connected to people that I love and otherwise didn't always have time to see, or like isolated time to talk about things from Jackie O to current events to theater. So that's bringing me a lot of joy. I'm also working on writing a musical, which is hilarious to hear it come out of my mouth because I played the clarinet like when I was in middle school. I am not writing the music of the musical. I am writing the book of the musical. It sort of started out as, how some casts and companies like will get together and do puzzles backstage or like on a 2-show day, we'll do puzzles. Me and a couple of other members of the Sing Street Company, that was like our puzzle when we were running a New York Theater Workshop. So we started writing this musical and now we're like, great, we have all this time to keep doing it. Do I think anything's going to come of it? Who's to say? But if you ask me, it's pretty good because we've all had time to focus on it. I think the story is really strong and the music that's being developed for it is really great. So yeah, that's fun. And that's especially fun, because I spend so much time in a job that I adore. I love being in middle management. I love being a stage manager, and also an educator, but it's fun to sort of flex that creative muscle in that way. So it's good.
That's awesome. Well, and you have such a background in working in new works and development and things, so I can't think of kind of anyone better suited than people that working on original works. Yeah.
I mean, I spent a lot of time, people talking about a single word, for an hour, like, that sort of thing. And knowing what the priorities are and knowing to trust the truth in it and the human experience that, informs it. So it's fun. I don't know what's going to come out of it, but I think you're right. There will be an artistic period that we all look back on and that people, years from now are going to be testing their students on whether or not it was Victorian or COVID.
COVID out. I love that. Well, as we're wrapping up, just as an educator, but also someone who is a working professional, which I think is so important to like show, because you and I met when I was at SUNY New Paltz and with Ken Goldstein and Catherine Doherty, who are just like shining examples of being a working professional and an educator and just kind of the heart that takes. What are some key things for our listeners out there if they're looking to make the jump to New York or looking to go to grad school? What are a couple things that you think really just set people apart, like as you've looked to hire PSMs or ASMs and things? What are just some things that you look for in a theater professional for hire?
I mean, I think if it's sort of a 2-part answer. So if you're looking, if you've chosen a market and New York is your market and that's where you want to at least give it a shot, I think people should not think about that's where I want to spend the rest of my life, but that's where I want to be. And so when you start thinking about it like that, I think that I wish that I knew sooner in my life that you really can reach out to people, and assuming that they have the wherewithal, the time to be in touch with you and share with you their experience. Theater people love being helpful,
Mhm,
especially right now. And so I feel like, had I known sooner that I could just start reaching to contacts that I know, that I knew people in New
mhm,
York, that they could put me in touch with people, that there's such great value in just getting to know people that are doing the thing you want to do or that are adjacent to it. And I think that that can feel really scary. But I know that for me and a lot of my many, many, many friends that are theater artists in New York, it adds value to our own experience that we've
mhm,
had in the past if we get to share it with somebody and help inform their future. So I feel like that's really important. As far as like finding people that are PAs or ASMs, really people hire the people they like. So I know the interviews can make people really nervous. And so there's sort of a margin for that understanding. But I think when people are
mhm,
comfortable with themselves, when they rise to the occasion of maybe not knowing everything, but being willing to give it a try. I don't know everything. There's still days where I'm like, I don't know how to do this thing. And so I have to ask somebody, but knowing
mhm,
well enough about themselves to
mhm,
be comfortable enough to say that. I think people that are present, that's a word that I've said probably 8 times in this, conversation that we're having, is that it's just about being present and
mhm,
being willing to be yourself and be vulnerable. And again, rise to the expectations that they've clearly set for themselves. Those are the things that I look for in people. Cause I always tell my students that people hire the people they like, they keep the people who know what they're doing, and they rehire the people who do it well. So, it's hard to
mhm.
audition for stage management. It's really about who you want to be with
Yeah,
for those long hours.
great. That's amazing. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for talking to me tonight. I know you've got a very busy schedule. So can you just tell the folks online, we talked about that you're the stage manager, but where can people find you online?
So I am very accessible on Facebook. So you can find me as Amanda Spooner on Facebook. I am on Instagram as Spoon for Better. That's the word for FOR. So Spoon for Better. Our Sminstagram is Sminsta 2020. There's also the group on Facebook that's Year of the Stage Manager 2020. And our website is ysm2020.com. So pretty easy to find, especially because it's all bright orange.
I love that. Well, thanks again for meeting with us tonight. I really appreciate it, and enjoy the rest of your extended spring break.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for this. Bye.
Of course, bye.
Um,